South Africa's Justice Minister is calling on citizens to report incidents of racism and discrimination directly to the Equality Court. This amid concerns that not enough action is being taken to stop racism in our country. Ronald Lamola addressed the 20th commemoration of the 3rd World Racism and Xenophobia Conference today. Govan Whittles was there. He joins us now live. Govan, we're going to play your story a little later, but let's break it down first. What is the National Action Plan to deal with racism and xenophobia in South Africa?
So the National Action Plan is the outcome of that World Conference Against Racism and Xenophobia that was held in 2001. That's the one that they were commemorating today in Kempton Park, at the same place where the CODESA 1 talks were held. So it was symbolic in some way. So essentially at the Conference Against Racism and Xenophobia, they resolved to create the National Action Plan, which would not only formulate how they would fight racism in terms of the law, but also how they would foster nation building and achieve social cohesion. So since then, it's been 20 years, but the National Action Plan stayed as a draft document for 17 years, was only approved by Cabinet in 2019, and now they're trying to implement it. But of course, there are already some steps that have been taken, such as the Prevention and Combating of Racism and Other Forms of Discrimination Bill, that's in Parliament, and also what happened with Penny Sparrow and the other jurisprudence which already exists, which has kind of set the tone for how racism will be dealt with. But the National Action Plan does have more details on what should be achieved. And let's listen to the Justice Minister, Ronald Lamola, about the plan itself and how he would want it implemented.
In 2001, South Africa hosted the 3rd World Conference Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance. This was a vote of confidence in us that our Constitution has the ingredients to transform our society. We can be a beacon of light to the world. Thank you, Sham, for raising the issue. Why did it take us for so long to come up with a National Action Plan? But we now have it. It's better late than never. Let's ensure that we implement it and work to build what the National Action Plan says we should do. 20 years later, Article 66 of the Durban Declaration and the Programme of Action is no longer something that we need to aspire to. It must be a reality and a necessity on our day-to-day lives. As we celebrate the 25 years anniversary of our Constitution coming into effect, we need to be more deliberate about our next 25 years. What happens in the next 25 years is in our hands. It will depend on what we do when we leave this conference. It depends on what all South Africans do in whatever corner where they are. Because the Constitution, this plan is not going to implement itself. It needs agents of transformation.
Interesting that the minister says people should report racism to the Equality Court. How exactly will that work?
So that's what he says should have been done all along. And he says that he believes that South Africa's laws against racism are tough enough, and what's missing are the voluminous cases that would essentially test the law. So the Justice Minister is saying here that if you experience an incident of racism, you should go directly to any court in the country, because he says any court is an equality court and can sit as an equality court, and report the incident of racism to the clerk of the court, who will then take it up. And then the matter would be heard by the magistrate, it would be adjudicated by the magistrate, and a sentence would be then imposed by the same magistrate. And essentially saying here that equality court cases are not prosecuted, they're heard in open court. So once you accuse someone of racism, they're going to issue that person a summons to come to court, and you'll have to argue the matter before the magistrate. And that route, he says, should be taken instead of going to the police station to open a case. So he's welcomed the case that was opened by the Stellenbosch student who experienced racism, but says he also wants, or he hopes, that he will go to the court. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
We just need to focus more on implementation. For example, the equality courts are there. Every court is an equality court, but if you look across the country, there are no real cases that come through, except a few that deal with these incidences of racism. And if you go to any small town across the country, any platform, there is a court, and there are racist incidences that may offend the equality section in the Constitution. So I think we need to develop more awareness to make people aware that they can use the Equality Court in any place where they are to report these incidences of racism. As you will have heard from the baseline study, that the biggest problem is that people do not report, while they feel and think they experience racism, but they do not really report it.
All right, we can leave it right there. Our reporter Govan Whittles covering that story for us.